The morning sun was barely up when I arrived at the county courthouse, briefcase in hand, wearing my simple gray suit. I saw her before she saw me. Stephanie, my daughter-in-law. She turned, and her eyes filled with something I can only describe as pure hatred. She stormed toward me, heels clicking on concrete. Before I could speak, she screamed loud enough for everyone to hear, "Filthy old woman! You're the shame of this family." Her hand connected with my face. The slap echoed. She pushed me backward toward the courthouse steps. My son Daniel stood just 3 feet away, staring at his shoes, silent. Let me tell you how we got here. Because nothing about this morning made sense unless you understood the years that led up to it. My name is Alana Foster. I'm 67 years old. And for the past 23 years, I've served as a circuit court judge in our county. It's work I've always taken seriously, never boasted about, never used for personal gain. I believe in the law, in fairness, in the idea that justice should be blind to everything except the truth. My husband Richard died 8 years ago. Heart attack. One moment he was laughing at dinner, the next he was gone. We'd been married for 34 years. He was a good man, the kind who believed in giving back to the community. Before he passed, Richard founded the Riverside Community Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping underprivileged youth in our area. Scholarships, after-school programs, mentorship. It was his passion project. His legacy. After he died, I threw myself into my work and volunteered with the foundation when I could. It kept me connected to him. Daniel is our only child, has 39 now, works in marketing. Always been a gentle soul. Maybe too gentle. 6 years ago, he married Stephanie. I remember the wedding. She was charming that day. Radiant even. She worked in the non-profit sector, or so she said. She talked about wanting to make a difference. I believed her. I wanted to believe her because my son loved her. But things changed quickly. Within the first year of their marriage, I noticed Daniel pulling away. Family dinners became less frequent. He'd make excuses. Work was busy. Stephanie wasn't feeling well. They had plans. At first, I didn't push. Young couples need space to build their lives together. But then the excuses became walls. Stephanie started making little comments when Daniel wasn't listening closely. "Oh, Alana. You must be so lonely in that big house all by yourself. Don't you think it's time to consider something smaller? Something more manageable for someone your age?" She'd smile when she said it, but her eyes were cold. I'd respond politely, change the subject. But the comments continued, grew sharper. By the 3rd year of their marriage, Stephanie had stopped pretending to like me altogether. She'd roll her eyes when I called. She'd answer Daniel's phone and tell me he was unavailable, even when I could hear him in the background asking who it was. She told him I was overbearing, that I was trying to control his life. None of it was true. But Daniel started believing her. I tried talking to him privately. I'd catch him at the grocery store or call his office. But Stephanie monitored everything. She had access to his email, his phone, his entire life. The few times I managed to reach him, he seemed distant, distracted. He'd say everything was fine. But his voice told a different story. What I didn't know then was that Stephanie had been systematically destroying our relationship with lies. She'd tell Daniel I'd said terrible things about him, show him fake text messages she'd created. She made him believe I thought he was a failure, that I was disappointed in him. None of it was real, but the poison worked. My son stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped being my son, in all but name. 3 years into their marriage, Stephanie volunteered to be treasurer for the Riverside Community Foundation. The board was thrilled. She had nonprofit experience, she said. She was family. She wanted to honor Richard's memory. They welcomed her with open arms. That's when the theft began. For 3 years, Stephanie systematically embezzled money from my late husband's charity. $375,000. She created fake invoices for programs that didn't exist. She transferred money to shell companies she'd set up. She forged signatures, She was meticulous, careful, patient, and because everyone trusted her, no one looked too closely. Until 2 months ago, when the current director noticed irregularities in the accounts, they launched an investigation. The truth came spilling out like water from a broken dam. Bank records, email trails, witnesses who'd seen things but hadn't wanted to cause trouble. It was all there, clear as day. The board filed a civil lawsuit. Criminal charges were pending. The trial was set for this morning, and last night, when I reviewed my docket for the week, I saw my name assigned to the case. Random rotation. Pure chance. The kind of coincidence that makes you believe in something bigger than yourself. It'd been assigned to sit in judgment over the woman who'd stolen from my husband's legacy and stolen my son from me. And she had no idea I was a judge. In 6 years of marriage to my son, Stephanie had never once asked about my career. To her, I was just a useless old woman taking up space in the world. I spent most of the night reviewing the case files, struggling with whether I should recuse myself. The law was clear. I had no direct stake in the foundation's current operations. My connection was to its founder, my deceased husband. I could remain impartial. I could follow the law. That's what judges do. We separate our personal feelings from our professional duties. I decided to proceed. This morning, I woke at 5, showered, dressed in my gray suit, the one I wear when I want to blend in, to be underestimated. I drove to the courthouse, parked in my usual spot. As I was walking toward the entrance, I saw them, Daniel and Stephanie, arriving together. He looked tired, worn down. She looked angry, her jaw set, her shoulders tense. That's when she saw me. And that's when everything exploded. After she slapped me, after she pushed me, after she screamed that I was the shame of the family, I stood there for a moment. My cheek was burning, my heart was pounding, but I didn't respond. I simply bent down, picked up my briefcase, and walked toward the courthouse entrance. Behind me, I could hear courthouse security moving quickly, their radios crackling. I walked through the metal detectors. The security guards looked at me with concern. "Judge Foster, are you all right?" one of them asked. I nodded. "I'm fine, thank you. Please preserve the security footage from outside." There was an incident. They understood immediately. One of them headed to the security office, while another asked if I needed medical attention. I declined. The bruise would speak for itself. I made my way to my chambers. My clerk, Grace, was already there, organizing files. She took one look at my face and gasped. "Judge, what happened?" I told her briefly. She was horrified. "Should I call the police?" I shook my head. "Not yet. First, we have a trial to conduct. But yes, make sure that footage is saved." Grace nodded, her face pale. I hung up my gray suit jacket and reached for my black judicial robe. The weight of it always centers me, reminds me of the responsibility I carry. I'm not just Alana when I wear this robe. I'm the law. I'm justice. I'm the voice that speaks for fairness when everything else is chaos. I took a deep breath and looked at myself in the small mirror in my chambers. My left cheek was already showing the beginning of a bruise. My eyes were tired but clear. I thought about Richard, about what he would want, about what justice actually means. Then Grace knocked softly. "Judge, they're ready for you." I opened the door to my chambers and prepared to walk into that courtroom. Prepared to face the woman who'd slapped me, stolen from my husband's legacy, and destroyed my relationship with my son. But there was something else in those files Grace had handed me just before I put on my robe. Additional evidence that had arrived late last night. I'd read it while reviewing the case. My hands had trembled as I turned the pages. Stephanie hadn't just stolen from the charity. She'd been planning something far worse. Documents showed she'd been working on having me declared mentally incompetent. She'd approached someone at the county health department 8 months ago, trying to get falsified mental health evaluations. She wanted me committed to a memory care facility. She wanted to take control of my assets, sell my house, erase me from existence. And Shed almost succeeded. The plan was set to execute next week. Shed already scheduled appointments with a guardianship attorney. Shed booked a moving company to clear out my home. Shed assumed this case would be settled quickly, that Shed have access to the stolen money, and that by this time next week, it'd be locked away somewhere. Helpless and forgotten, my hands steadied as I held those papers. This wasn't just about justice for the charity anymore. This was about my survival, my freedom, my life. I straightened my robe, lifted my chin, and walked toward the courtroom. The bailiff's voice rang out clear and formal. All rise. The Honorable Judge Alana Foster presiding. I walked through the door from my chambers and stepped up to the bench. The courtroom was full. About 40 people stood as I entered. Lawyers at their tables, witnesses in the gallery, court staff at their stations. A reporter from the local paper sat in the back row, notebook ready. At the defendant's table sat Stephanie with her attorney, Marcus Brennan. He was a slick corporate lawyer, expensive suit, carefully styled hair. The kind of attorney who charges $500 an hour and makes sure everyone knows it. Stephanie was looking down at some papers, hadn't glanced up yet. At the plaintiff's table sat the attorneys representing the Riverside Community Foundation's board. I recognized them. Good lawyers. Honest. Thorough. In the gallery, fourth row on the left, Daniel sat alone. His hands were clasped in his lap. He looked smaller somehow. Diminished. I took my seat. The leather chair creaked slightly. Please be seated, I said. Everyone sat. The rustling of fabric, shuffling of papers, clearing of throats, normal courtroom sounds. And then Stephanie looked up. I watched her face. It's something I've learned to do over 23 years on the bench. Watch faces. People tell you everything with their faces if you know how to look. Her eyes met mine. For a split second, there was nothing. Just blank processing. Then recognition hit. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth fell open. The papers in her hands slipped and scattered across the table. All color drained from her face, leaving her skin a sickly gray. She grabbed Marcus' arm. I could see her whispering frantically, urgently. He looked confused, flipped through his notes, trying to understand what had rattled his client so completely. That's her, Stephanie hissed, loud enough for me to hear from the bench. That's Daniel's mother. That's the old woman She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Marcus' face changed as understanding dawned. He stood quickly, his chair scraping against the floor. Your Honor, I need to request an immediate sidebar. Approach the bench, I said calmly. Marcus and the plaintiff's attorneys came forward. Marcus spoke quietly but urgently. Your Honor, I've just learned that you have a personal connection to this case. The defendant is married to your son. Given this relationship, I must respectfully request that you recuse yourself. There's an obvious conflict of interest here. I'd been expecting this. I kept my voice level and professional. Counselor, I was assigned to this case through the court's standard random rotation system. I learned of the assignment last night when reviewing my docket. The case involves the Riverside Community Foundation, which was founded by my late husband 23 years ago. However, I have no financial interest in the foundation, no role in its operations, and no direct stake in the outcome of this civil matter. My connection is to the founder, who is deceased. Under judicial ethics guidelines, I am not required to recuse myself. However, I can assure all parties that I will remain impartial and follow the law. The plaintiff's attorneys spoke up. Your Honor, we have full confidence in your ability to hear this case fairly. Judge Foster's reputation for integrity is well known. We have no objection to you presiding. Marcus tried again. Your Honor, with respect, the defendant is married to your son. That's an ongoing family relationship. The appearance of impropriety alone should. I cut him off gently but firmly. Counselor, the law does not require recusal based solely on family connection when I have no personal stake in the outcome. If you wish to file a formal motion for recusal, you may do so, but it will be denied. This case will proceed. Marcus knew had lost this argument. He nodded stiffly and returned to his table. The plaintiff's attorneys looked satisfied as they returned to theirs. Before anyone could sit, Stephanie jumped to her feet. "This is a setup. She planned this. You all see it, right? She's just a bitter old woman who wants revenge because—" "Miss Brennan," I said, my voice sharp as a blade, "you will remain seated unless directly addressed by the court or your attorney. You will not speak out of turn. Do you understand?" Stephanie's face flushed red with rage. "You can't judge me. You're not impartial. You're just—" "One more outburst," I said, and my voice was ice now, "and I will hold you in contempt of court. Sit down." Marcus grabbed her arm and pulled her back into her chair. She sat, but her eyes burned with hatred. I could feel it across the room, hot and venomous. I looked at the court reporter. "Let the record show that the defendant has been warned regarding courtroom decorum." Then I addressed the full courtroom. "Before we proceed with opening statements, I must inform all parties of an incident that occurred approximately 30 minutes ago outside this courthouse." The room went silent. Everyone leaned forward slightly. As I was arriving for today's proceedings, I was physically assaulted on the courthouse steps. The defendant, Stephanie Brennan, approached me, shouted verbal abuse, struck me across the face, and pushed me. There were multiple witnesses, including courthouse security personnel. The entire incident was captured on security cameras. I will be filing a separate report regarding this assault on a judicial officer. However, I want to make clear to all parties that this incident, while serious, will not affect my ability to fairly adjudicate the civil matter before us today. The assault will be dealt with through appropriate channels. I paused, then turned my face slightly, so the bruise on my cheek was visible to everyone in the courtroom. The mark was darkening now, purple and red, spreading across my skin. Security footage has been preserved. This incident will be referred to the appropriate authorities. Physical assault on a sitting judge is a federal offense. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The reporter in the back was writing furiously. Marcus had his head in his hands. Daniel, in the gallery, looked like he might be sick. And Stephanie had gone from red to white again. I watched the realization wash over her face. She hadn't just slapped an old woman. She'd assaulted a federal judicial officer. In front of witnesses. On camera. The federal guidelines for such an offense carried mandatory prison time. She started hyperventilating. Marcus leaned over, trying to calm her, but she pushed him away. "Your Honor," Marcus said, standing again, his voice shaky now. "May I request a brief recess to consult with my client?" 5 minutes, I said. "Bailiff, please ensure the defendant remains in the courtroom." I stood. Everyone stood. I walked back to my chambers, closed the door, and for just a moment, let myself feel it. The sting of the slap, the shock of being pushed, the humiliation of being called filthy, a shame, worthless. I felt all of it, and then I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and let it go. There was work to do. When I returned, Stephanie looked like she'd been crying. Her makeup was smeared. Marcus looked grim. The plaintiff's attorneys looked quietly confident. "Well, proceed with opening statements," I said. "Counsel for the plaintiff, you may begin." The plaintiff's attorney stood. Her name was Catherine Wells, a woman in her early 50s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for thorough preparation. She approached the small podium between the two tables and addressed the courtroom. "This case," she began, "is about trust, betrayal, and theft. The Riverside Community Foundation was established 23 years ago to help young people in our community, to give them opportunities, to change lives. For 2 decades, it did exactly that. Hundreds of young people received scholarships, thousands benefited from programs and mentorship. And then 3 years ago, the defendant, Stephanie Brennan, volunteered to serve as treasurer." Catherine paused. "Let that sink in. Volunteered. Offered her services. Said she wanted to help. Said she wanted to honor the legacy of the founder. The board, grateful for her willingness to serve, welcomed her. They trusted her. That trust was a mistake. She clicked a remote, and a screen behind her lit up with a bank statement. Over the next 3 years, Miss Brennan systematically stole $375,000 from this charity. She created fake invoices for programs that never existed. She established shell companies to funnel money into her personal accounts. She forged signatures. She manipulated records. She lied to the board, to the director, to everyone. More images appeared on the screen. Bank transfers, forged documents, email chains. The evidence was damning. "We will show you a clear paper trail," Catherine continued. "We will present testimony from forensic accountants, from board members, from witnesses who saw the defendant's lavish lifestyle change dramatically during this period. Luxury vacations to Europe, designer clothing, a new car worth $80,000, cosmetic procedures costing tens of thousands. All while she told people the charity was struggling, that donations were down, that they needed to cut programs." Catherine's voice hardened. The defendant didn't steal from a nameless corporation. She stole from children. From teenagers trying to get an education. From families trying to give their kids a better life. She stole hope. She stole futures. And she did it with calculation, with deliberation, and without remorse. Catherine returned to her table. "Thank you, Your Honor." I nodded. "Counsel for the defense." Marcus stood slowly. He knew he was facing an uphill battle, and it showed. He approached the podium and cleared his throat. "Your Honor?" "Members of the court." His voice was smooth but lacked conviction. "My client, Stephanie Brennan, denies these allegations. The evidence will show that there were multiple people with access to foundation accounts. Technology can be compromised. Records can be hacked. My client was a volunteer, working without pay, trying to help a worthy cause. She had no motive to steal. Why would someone risk everything for money when they had no need of it?" It was a weak argument, and everyone knew it. Marcus continued for a few more minutes, trying to create reasonable doubt, but his heart wasn't in it. When he sat down, I called for the plaintiff's first witness. The charity's current director took the stand. Thomas Harper was a man in his 60s who'd worked with Richard back when the foundation started. He testified about noticing discrepancies in the accounts, about initiating an internal audit, about the horror of discovering what had been happening. "When did you first suspect something was wrong?" Catherine asked. "About 4 months ago," Thomas said. "We were preparing for our annual report, and the numbers didn't match our expectations. WED had good donor response, but our bank balance was much lower than it should have been. I asked Miss Brennan about it, and she told me there had been unexpected expenses, but when I asked for documentation, she kept delaying." "What did you do?" "I went to the board. We hired an independent auditor." Thomas' voice shook. What they found was devastating. 3 years of theft. 3 years of lies, the forensic accountant testified next. She walked the court through spreadsheets, bank records, and money trails. It was methodical, thorough, and absolutely damning. She showed how money was transferred from the foundation to shell companies with names like Youth Services Initiative and Community Education Partners. Both companies existed only on paper, registered to a business address that turned out to be a mailbox rental. Both companies had bank accounts that fed directly into Stephanie's personal accounts. "Is there any doubt in your mind about who committed these thefts?" Catherine asked. "None whatsoever," the accountant replied. "The signature patterns, the timing of the transfers, the fact that Miss Brennan was the only person who could authorize these specific transactions, the evidence is conclusive." Next came a former board member, an older man named George Patterson. He testified about how Stephanie had insisted on handling all financial matters herself, how Shed refused oversight, how Shed always had excuses when anyone asked questions. "She said she didn't want to burden us with details," George said sadly. "We trusted her. She was family, or so we thought." The morning passed with witness after witness building an unshakable case. During a brief recess, I saw Daniel in the hallway. He stood apart from everyone, staring out a window. He looked broken. When we reconvened, Catherine called Amanda Sullivan to the stand. Amanda was a woman in her late 30s, stylishly dressed, with the uncomfortable air of someone who didn't want to be there. "Miss Sullivan," Catherine began. "How do you know the defendant?" "We were friends," Amanda said quietly. "Or I thought we were. We met at a charity gala about 4 years ago. We had coffee occasionally, went to lunch." "Did the defendant ever discuss her work with the Riverside Community Foundation?" Amanda's face darkened. "Yes. She bragged about it." "Bragged?" Amanda nodded. "She said it was the easiest money Shed ever made. She called the charity a stupid organization, helping kids who'd probably end up in prison anyway. She said Richard Foster's widow was too senile to notice anything was wrong." I kept my face neutral, but my hands tightened on the gavel. "She said she deserved that money more than delinquent kids did," Amanda continued. "She talked about the trips she was taking, the things she was buying. I thought she was joking at first, but then I saw the luxury items Shed show up with. A handbag that cost $7,000, shoes that cost $2,000, and Shed laugh about how easy it all was." "Why did you end your friendship with her?" "Because I realized she wasn't joking." Amanda's voice broke. "She really believed she had the right to steal from children. I couldn't be around that. I stopped returning her calls. But I felt so guilty. I should have said something sooner." "You're saying something now," Catherine said gently. "Thank you." When Marcus cross-examined Amanda, he tried to suggest she was a disgruntled former friend making up stories. But Amanda held firm. Everything Shed said was true, and her pain at not speaking sooner was obvious. The afternoon session brought even more devastating evidence. Financial records showed Stephanie had opened credit cards in Daniel's name without his knowledge. His credit score had been destroyed. He couldn't get loans, couldn't make major purchases. Meanwhile, Stephanie controlled every cent in their household. A private investigator testified about following Stephanie and documenting her spending habits. Photos appeared on the screen. Stephanie at expensive restaurants. Stephanie shopping on Fifth Avenue in New York. Stephanie at a spa resort that cost $3,000 a night. Through it all, Stephanie sat at the defense table, her face growing harder, more defiant. She whispered constantly to Marcus, who kept shaking his head, trying to quiet her. And then, just before we were about to adjourn for the day, Catherine said, "Your Honor, we have one more witness." She just arrived. The courtroom doors opened, and a woman in her mid-50s walked in. She was nervous, clutching her purse, but her eyes were determined. She was sworn in and sat in the witness box. "Please state your name for the record," Catherine said. "Patricia Coleman." Stephanie went rigid in her chair. I watched her face drain of color again. "Miss Coleman, how do you know the defendant?" Patricia took a deep breath. "She threatened me. She threatened my daughter." The courtroom went silent. "Please explain," Catherine said. "I work at the county health department," Patricia said. 8 months ago, Stephanie Brennan approached me in the parking lot after work. She said she needed a favor. She wanted me to falsify mental health evaluation documents. "For whom?" Patricia looked at me. "For Judge Alana Foster." She wanted documents that would make it look like Judge Foster was suffering from dementia, that she was incompetent to handle her own affairs. She offered me $20,000. "Did you agree?" "No." Patricia's voice was firm. "Absolutely not. What she was asking was illegal and immoral." But then she showed me photos of my daughter, Emily. "My daughter is 22, lives alone in an apartment downtown." Stephanie knew where she lived, knew her schedule. She implied that if I didn't help her, something bad might happen to Emily. "What did you do?" I was terrified. I have a daughter to protect. So I said I'd think about it, just to buy time. But then Stephanie kept contacting me. She'd show up at my workplace. She'd send me text messages with photos of Emily. It was psychological torture. Why didn't you go to the authorities? I was scared, Patricia said, tears streaming now. I thought if I reported her, she'd follow through on her threats, but then I heard about the investigation into the charity theft. I realized this woman was dangerous, that she wouldn't stop. So I went to the prosecutor's office last week. I told them everything. Catherine submitted evidence. Text messages from Stephanie. Photos. Documentation of the threats. It was all there, Your Honor, Catherine said. This wasn't just embezzlement. This was a conspiracy to commit fraud, to falsify medical documents, to strip a sitting judge of her rights and freedom. The defendant was planning to have Judge Foster declared incompetent, committed to a facility, and stripped of her assets. She was days away from executing this plan. The courtroom erupted. People were talking over each other. Daniel stood up in the gallery, his voice breaking through the chaos. What? Stephanie was screaming at Patricia. You lying witch! I never. You're making this up. I banged the gavel hard. Order! Order in this court! But Stephanie wouldn't stop. She was standing now, pointing at Patricia, her face twisted with rage. She's lying! All of them are lying. This is all a setup to destroy me. Miss Brennan, I said sharply. Sit down and be silent, or I will have you removed. She finally sat, but her chest was heaving, her fists clenched. Well, take a 15-minute recess, I announced. When we return, the defense may present its case. I stood. Everyone stood. I walked back to my chambers, and only when the door closed did I let myself feel the weight of what had just been revealed. Shed wanted to lock me away, to erase me, to steal everything I had left. Grace brought me water. Judge, are you all right? I nodded. I'm fine. But make sure every word of Patricia Coleman's testimony is accurately recorded. Every word. When court reconvened, it was Stephanie's turn to take the stand. Marcus called Stephanie to testify in her own defense. It was a calculated risk. Her earlier outbursts had damaged her credibility, but Marcus probably figured the jury-like audience needed to hear directly from her, needed to see something other than rage. Stephanie walked to the witness stand with careful steps. Her whole demeanor had changed. The angry, defiant woman had vanished, replaced by someone softer, more vulnerable. Her shoulders were rounded. Her voice, when she was sworn in, was barely above a whisper. Marcus approached with practiced gentleness. Miss Brennan, can you tell us why you volunteered to be treasurer for the Riverside Community Foundation? Stephanie's eyes welled with tears. I wanted to help. I'd worked in the nonprofit sector before. I knew how difficult it was to keep organizations running. When I married Daniel, I learned about his father's legacy, about this beautiful charity Richard had built. I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to honor him. Her voice caught. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Several people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably, torn between the evidence they'd seen and the woman they were seeing now. Did you steal from the foundation? Marcus asked. No, Stephanie said firmly. Never. I worked hard for that charity. I gave my time freely. Why would I steal? I didn't need money. How do you explain the evidence showing transfers to accounts in your name? She shook her head. I don't know. Maybe someone hacked the system? Maybe someone set me up? All I know is I didn't do this. It might have been convincing if not for the mountain of evidence that had already been presented, Marcus continued, leading her through gentle questions, trying to paint her as a victim of circumstance. Then, it was Catherine's turn for cross-examination. Catherine stood slowly, and there was something dangerous in her calm. Miss Brennan, you testified that you wanted to honor Richard Foster's legacy. Had you ever met Richard Foster? Stephanie hesitated. Well, no. But, so you never actually knew the man whose legacy you claim to have wanted to honor? I knew of him. Daniel told me stories. Catherine pulled out a piece of paper. This is an email you sent to a friend 3 years ago. Do you recognize it? Stephanie squinted. Maybe? Catherine read aloud. Richard Foster's charity is such a waste of money. These kids are never going to amount to anything anyway. Why pour resources into a lost cause? Did you write that? Stephanie's careful composure cracked. That was taken out of context. I was just... Yes or no, Miss Brennan? Did you write those words? Yes. But, so, when you testified that you wanted to honor Richard Foster's legacy, that was a lie, wasn't it? Objection, Marcus tried. Overruled, I said. Stephanie's face was flushing red now. I misspoke in that email. I was having a bad day. Catherine moved on swiftly. You testified you didn't need money. Can you explain why, during the time you served as treasurer, you purchased a car worth $80,000? That was, Stephanie faltered. That was from savings. What savings? Your tax returns show minimal income. Where did the money come from? It was a gift. From whom? Stephanie said nothing. Catherine pressed forward, question after question, dismantling every claim Stephanie had made. The vacation to Paris? Can't explain it. The designer clothes? No explanation. The cosmetic procedures totaling $40,000? Silence. By the time Catherine finished, Stephanie was no longer the sympathetic figure who'd taken the stand. She was cornered, exposed, angry. Marcus tried to rehabilitate her with a few more questions, but the damage was done. Miss Brennan, you may step down, I said. Stephanie stood, but as she walked back to the defense table, she stumbled. She grabbed the edge of the table and gasped. I can't breathe. My heart. She collapsed theatrically into her chair, one hand over her chest. Bailiff? I said calmly. Please call the paramedics. Marcus rushed to her side, but he'd seen this performance before. In 3 decades of legal work, he'd watched countless defendants try this exact tactic when things weren't going their way. The paramedics arrived within minutes. A young woman and an older man named Frank. They checked Stephanie's vitals, while the courtroom watched in tense silence. Frank stood and approached the bench. He spoke quietly, but I could hear him. Judge, there's nothing wrong with her. Blood pressure's normal. Heart rate's normal. Breathing's fine. She's faking. I nodded. Recommend hospital transport for evaluation? We can if you want. But she'll be discharged within an hour. There's no medical emergency here. I looked at Stephanie. She was watching us through half-closed eyes, still maintaining her act. Miss Brennan, I said clearly. The paramedics have evaluated you. They find no medical emergency. However, if you feel you need hospital care, we can arrange transport. Please note that this trial will continue tomorrow whether you're present or not, and you will be required to complete any remaining testimony. Suddenly, Stephanie's breathing normalized. Her color returned. She sat up straighter. Actually, she said, I'm feeling better now. A few people in the gallery made sounds of disgust. The reporter was writing furiously. Then, well, continue, I said. Does the defense have any other witnesses? Marcus looked defeated. No, Your Honor. Defense rests. We moved to closing arguments. Catherine was thorough and devastating. Marcus tried his best, but there was nothing to work with. The evidence was overwhelming. The testimony was damning. And Stephanie's own behavior had sealed her fate. As Marcus sat down after his closing statement, I asked for a 10-minute recess to review my notes. In my chambers, I sat quietly, organizing my thoughts. The law was clear. The evidence was incontrovertible. There was only one possible ruling. When I returned to the courtroom, everyone stood. I took my seat and looked at the assembled crowd. Before I rule, I said, there's one more matter to address. During the defense's cross-examination of Miss Brennan, the plaintiff's attorney asked about her plans for next Tuesday. He'd like the record to reflect the document that was entered as evidence. Catherine stood. Your Honor, that document shows an appointment confirmation between the defendant and a guardianship attorney. The appointment was scheduled for 2 o'clock next Tuesday afternoon. The stated purpose was to commence emergency guardianship proceedings against you. There was a collective gasp in the courtroom. Additionally, Catherine continued. We have evidence that Miss Brennan had scheduled a moving company to clear out your residence on the same day. Shed also contacted 3 memory care facilities about available rooms. She wasn't just trying to steal from the charity, Catherine said, her voice rising. She was trying to steal Judge Foster's freedom, her home, her life. She was days away from having her declared incompetent and institutionalized. Daniel stood up in the gallery. His face was white. His voice shook. You monster! You absolute monster! Stephanie turned in her chair, her carefully maintained victim persona shattering completely. She deserves it, she screamed. Useless old hag taking up space and resources. Why should she get to live in that big house when I'm stuck in a tiny apartment? Why should she have money and respect when I have nothing? She's worthless. Old, stupid, and worthless. The courtroom erupted. People were shouting. Marcus was trying to control his client, but Stephanie wouldn't stop. She should have died years ago, Stephanie shrieked. Her and her precious Richard and their stupid charity. I deserved that money. I deserved all of it. Bailiff, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. Please restrain the defendant. 2 court officers moved toward Stephanie. She fought them, still screaming obscenities. It took both officers to get her under control. As they restrained her, I made my ruling. This court is in recess. The defendant will remain in custody of the court officers. We will reconvene in 30 minutes for my judgment. I stood and walked to my chambers. Only when the door closed did I allow my hands to tremble. During the recess, I sat in my chambers, trying to process everything that had unfolded. The mask had finally come off completely. Stephanie's rage, her entitlement, her complete lack of remorse. It was all there, exposed for everyone to see. Grace knocked gently. Judge, they're ready when you are. But there's something else. Daniel Foster is asking to speak with the court. He says he has information relevant to the case and wants to testify. I was silent for a moment. This is highly irregular. I know, Grace said. But he seems quite insistent. Says it's important. When court reconvened, I addressed the unusual situation. Before I deliver my ruling, there's been a request from Daniel Foster to provide testimony. This is unusual given that he wasn't on either witness list. But in the interest of complete truth, I'm going to allow it. Mr. Foster, please approach the witness stand. Daniel stood from the gallery. He looked terrified but determined. As he walked to the front, I saw him properly for the first time in years. My son. Had gotten older, of course, but there was something else. He looked worn down, hollowed out, like someone who'd been fighting a battle for so long had forgotten what peace felt like. He was sworn in and sat down. His hands were shaking. The plaintiff's attorney stood. Mr. Foster, you asked to testify. What would you like to tell this court? Daniel took a deep breath. His voice was quiet at first. I've known about the theft for 4 months. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. I found documents in our home office, Daniel continued. Bank statements, transfer records. I confronted Stephanie about it privately. She told me if I said anything to anyone, she'd destroy me. She said she'd already prepared false documentation showing I was an abuser. She'd doctor photos, create fake medical records, get statements from friends she'd coached. She said I'd lose my job, my reputation, everything. I'd end up in jail while she walked free. Why didn't you come forward? The attorney asked gently. Daniel's voice broke. Because I was terrified. Because she'd already destroyed my credit, controlled every aspect of my finances, isolated me from everyone I cared about. I felt trapped, completely trapped. He wiped his eyes. She took everything from me piece by piece. First, it was small things. Suggesting I didn't need to call my mom so often. Making plans on days I usually visited. Then it got bigger. She'd show me fake text messages supposedly from my mother, saying terrible things about me. Things like, I was a disappointment, that I'd never amount to anything. I believed them, because I couldn't imagine someone creating lies that elaborate, You never verified these messages with your mother directly? By the time I thought to try, Stephanie had me convinced my mother hated me. That reaching out would just cause more pain. Daniel looked at me then, his eyes pleading. I'm so sorry, Mom. I mean, Your Honor. I should have questioned it. Should have fought harder. I kept my face neutral, but my heart was breaking. The attorney continued. Mr. Foster, you mentioned financial control. Can you explain? Stephanie convinced me to put everything in her name. Said it was for tax purposes. I gave her every paycheck. She gave me an allowance like I was a child. I worked 2 jobs while she spent stolen money on luxury items. I couldn't afford a lawyer. Couldn't afford to leave. I was working 60 hours a week and had nothing to show for it. When did things start to change? 4 months ago, when I found the documents, I started documenting everything. Taking photos of records when she wasn't looking. Recording conversations. I live in a one-party consent state, so it was legal. I saved emails. Built a case file. I contacted the authorities anonymously at first, gave them tips. Then, about 12 weeks ago, I found the courage to come forward officially. Why now? What changed? Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. 7 weeks ago, something arrived at my workplace. Stephanie didn't know about it because it didn't come to our house. He opened the envelope carefully. It's a birthday card. From 6 years ago, from my mother. He held it up. I could see Alana written on the front in my own handwriting. I'd hidden it when Stephanie and I first married, Daniel said. I found it again when I was cleaning out a storage box. Inside, my mother wrote, Daniel, no matter what happens, no matter how much time passes, no matter what anyone tells you, I love you. I will always love you. I will always be your mother. You can always come home. His voice broke completely. I'd spent 6 years believing my mother hated me, that I was worthless, that I was alone. And then I found this card and realized that while I'd abandoned her, she never abandoned me. She never stopped loving me. And that's when I knew I had to be brave. I had to fight back. For her. For my father's memory. For the kids the charity was supposed to help. For myself. A tear rolled down his cheek. So I went to the FBI. I became a cooperating witness. I wore a wire. I recorded Stephanie admitting to the theft, laughing about the stupid charity, discussing her plan to have my mother institutionalized. I gave them everything. The attorney produced a flash drive. Your Honor, this contains the recordings Mr. Foster made, all legally obtained under single-party consent laws. Would you like to review them? Submit them into evidence, I said, my voice tight. We spent the next 20 minutes listening to excerpts. Stephanie's voice came through clear and damning, bragging about the theft, mocking the charity, discussing in cold detail how she'd have me declared incompetent. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. When the final recording ended, Stephanie screamed from the back where the officers held her. You traitor! You weak little mama's boy! We were supposed to do this together! Daniel turned to look at her. No, Stephanie. You did this. You stole. You lied. You destroyed everything good. I just finally found the courage to tell the truth. The attorney had one final question. Mr. Foster, I understand you've been granted immunity in exchange for your cooperation? Yes, Daniel said. I cooperated fully with federal investigators starting 12 weeks ago. I wore a wire for numerous conversations. I provided documentation. I testified before a grand jury. I have complete immunity from prosecution related to any knowledge of the theft. I have nothing to hide. Stephanie's last desperate attempt to drag Daniel down had failed. She'd thought he was still under her control, still too scared to stand up. She'd been wrong. Thank you, Mr. Foster, the attorney said. No further questions. Marcus declined to cross-examine. What could he possibly ask that would help his client now? I looked at Daniel. You may step down. He stood slowly. For a moment, our eyes met. I gave him a tiny nod. Not forgiveness yet, because that would take time, but acknowledgement. Had done the right thing, even though it came late. The courtroom was silent as Daniel returned to his seat in the gallery. Now, I said, I'm ready to deliver my ruling. I took a moment to collect myself, to center my thoughts. This was the moment everything had been building toward. The moment where law and justice had to align, where personal pain had to be set aside in service of truth. I have reviewed all evidence, heard all testimony, and considered arguments from both sides. The facts before this court are clear and compelling. The courtroom was completely still. The evidence presented shows, without any reasonable doubt, that defendant Stephanie Brennan knowingly, willfully, and deliberately embezzled funds from the Riverside Community Foundation over a 3-year period. The paper trail is indisputable. Bank records show transfers from foundation accounts to shell companies and then to the defendant's personal accounts. We have testimony from multiple witnesses, including forensic accountants, board members, and former associates of the defendant. We have the defendant's own recorded admissions, legally obtained, where she confesses to the theft and mocks the very charity she claimed to serve. I paused, letting the weight of the evidence settle. Furthermore, this court has heard testimony regarding a conspiracy to commit fraud against this court. Against me personally, the defendant attempted to falsify medical documents to have me declared mentally incompetent, with the goal of seizing my assets and institutionalizing me against my will. She threatened witnesses to secure their cooperation. She planned, in detail, to strip me of my freedom and my life. My voice hardened. This wasn't just theft. This was a calculated, prolonged campaign of cruelty, manipulation, and abuse directed at vulnerable populations and individuals. Therefore, on the matter of civil liability, I find the defendant, Stephanie Brennan, liable for theft, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Regarding damages, the plaintiff has proven direct theft of $375,000. Additionally, the charity suffered reputational harm, loss of donor confidence, and significant operational disruption, requiring extensive investigation and remediation. I looked directly at Stephanie. She was being restrained by 2 officers, but her eyes burned with hatred. I award the plaintiff full restitution in the amount of $375,000, representing the exact sum stolen. I award additional compensatory damages of $125,000 for the harm caused to the organization's reputation and operations. I award punitive damages of $250,000 to serve as a deterrent and to be paid directly to the Riverside Community Foundation to continue its work. Total judgment, $750,000, payable immediately. Stephanie gasped. Marcus sat with his head in his hands. Additionally, I order the following. Defendant is ordered to surrender all assets for immediate liquidation to satisfy this judgment. Defendant is prohibited from serving on any nonprofit board, handling charitable funds, or working in any fiduciary capacity for the remainder of her life. Defendant must issue a public written apology to be published in local newspapers at her own expense, though I expect such an apology to be meaningless given her demonstrated lack of remorse. I took a breath. Regarding this morning's assault on a judicial officer, I am filing a formal criminal complaint with the United States Attorney's Office. Assault on a federal judge is a serious crime under federal law. The security footage, witness statements, and my own testimony will be provided to federal prosecutors. That matter is beyond this court's jurisdiction, but I trust justice will be served through appropriate federal channels. Regarding the conspiracy to fraudulently obtain guardianship, I am referring all evidence to the State Attorney General's office for investigation and potential prosecution. Patricia Coleman's testimony regarding threats will be forwarded to local law enforcement for investigation of witness intimidation charges. I banged my gavel once. On all counts, I find for the plaintiff. Judgment is entered accordingly. Stephanie began screaming, "You can't do this. Ill appeal. You're biased." This is all because you're a vindictive old witch who— I banged my gavel sharply. Bailiff, the defendant is in contempt of court. 30 days in county jail for contempt, to run concurrent with any other sentences imposed. Stephanie fought against the officers holding her. She cursed, screamed, tried to lunge toward the bench. It took both officers to physically restrain her. Her rage was complete, uncontrolled, shocking in its intensity. As they dragged her toward the door, she shouted one final, desperate thing. "Daniel, tell them! Tell them you helped me! We did this together! You're just as guilty as I am!" The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Everyone turned to look at Daniel. I looked at my son. His face was calm. Sad, but calm. He stood. "Your Honor, I have complete immunity. I cooperated with federal prosecutors beginning 12 weeks ago. I wore a wire during multiple conversations with the defendant. I testified before a grand jury. I provided extensive documentation. I have nothing to hide. The federal prosecutors have confirmed my cooperation and granted full immunity in writing." It was Stephanie's last attempt to drag him down with her, to hurt him one final time, and it had failed completely. Her face showed utter shock, then betrayal, then pure rage. She screamed incoherently as the officers removed her from the courtroom. The doors closed behind her. The screaming faded. Silence settled over the room. "This court is adjourned," I said quietly. I banged the gavel one final time. Everyone stood as I rose from the bench. I walked back toward my chambers, my robe feeling heavier than usual. Grace was waiting. "Judge, are you all right?" I nodded. "Ask Daniel if he'll wait for a few minutes. Tell him I'd like to speak with him. Not as a judge. As his mother." Grace smiled gently. "Of course." I closed the door to my chambers and sat down. I removed my robe, hung it carefully. Underneath, I was just Alana again, just a mother who'd lost her son for 6 years, and was hoping, somehow, to begin finding him again. There was a soft knock. "Come in," I said. The door opened. Daniel stood there, uncertain, scared, hopeful. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. And for the first time in 6 years, I smiled at my son. Daniel stepped into my chambers and closed the door behind him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other. Really looked. For the first time in so long. "Sit down, honey," I finally said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. He sat, and immediately tears started streaming down his face. I don't know what to say. I don't know where to start. I came around the desk and sat in the chair next to him, not across from him, not as a judge, but as his mother. "You don't have to say anything right now." "But I do," he insisted. "Mom, I'm so sorry. For everything. For believing her lies. For abandoning you. For standing there this morning and watching her hit you and doing nothing. I've failed you in every possible way." The pain in his voice was raw and real. I reached out and took his hand. "You were a victim too, Daniel. I see that now. What she did to you, the control, the manipulation, the financial abuse, that's real. You're not weak for falling into her trap. She was very skilled at what she did, but I should have been stronger. I should have questioned things more. I should have protected you." I squeezed his hand. "Abusers are experts at making their victims feel like everything is their fault. That's how they maintain control. She isolated you, controlled your money, fed you lies, and made you believe you were powerless. That's not your fault." He cried harder. There were nights I cried myself to sleep. I felt so alone, so trapped. I wanted to call you so many times, but I'd convinced myself you hated me. "I never hated you," I said, my own voice breaking. "Not for 1 second. I was heartbroken. I was confused. I missed you desperately. But I never stopped loving you. You're my son. That doesn't change." "That birthday card," he said. "The one I found. Your words saved me, Mom. They reminded me of who I really was. Who you raised me to be. And that's when I knew I had to fight back. I'm so proud of you for doing that. For going to the authorities. For wearing that wire even though you must have been terrified. That took real courage. We sat there together. Both crying. Both beginning the long process of healing. After a while, the tears slowed. We talked about everything. About the 6 years wed lost. About the lies Stephanie had told. About how Daniel had felt trapped and powerless. About my own pain and loneliness. What happens now? Daniel asked eventually. For you, I mean. With the assault charge and everything? The federal prosecutors will handle that, I said. Assault on a judicial officer is serious. She'll likely face additional prison time beyond what she gets for the embezzlement and fraud charges. And the guardianship thing? She really was going to have you locked up? I nodded. She had appointments scheduled. A guardianship attorney. A moving company. She'd contacted memory care facilities. She was days away from trying to execute the plan. If Patricia Coleman hadn't come forward, if the charity investigation hadn't happened when it did, I might be in a very different situation right now. Daniel's face darkened with anger. How could someone be that evil? I don't think she sees it as evil. I think she genuinely believes she was entitled to everything. Entitled to the money, to your servitude, to erasing me. That kind of narcissism doesn't recognize other people as fully human. We're just obstacles or tools to her. What are you going to do now? I smiled softly. Keep doing my job. Keep serving on the bench. Keep trying to make sure justice is served for people who need it. And rebuild my relationship with my son, if hell let me. Of course, Daniel said quickly. I want that more than anything. I know it won't be easy. I know trust takes time to rebuild. But I want to try. So do I said. We talked for another hour. About his plans. Had filed for divorce, of course. Started therapy. Found a support group for people who'd survived emotional and financial abuse. Had moved into a small apartment. Was living simply, while he rebuilt his finances and his life. I have nothing, he admitted. She took everything. Destroyed my credit. I'm starting from zero at 39 years old. You have yourself back, I said firmly. You have your integrity. You have people who love you. That's not nothing. That's everything. 3 months passed. The world kept turning. But things were different now. Better. Stephanie's criminal trial was swift. With the recordings, the documents, the testimony, and her complete meltdown in civil court, all on record. Her attorney advised her to take a plea deal. She refused at first, still insisting she'd done nothing wrong. But eventually, reality set in. She pleaded guilty to federal embezzlement charges, conspiracy to commit fraud, and assault on a judicial officer. The judge sentenced her to 8 years for the financial crimes and an additional 2 years for the assault. 10 years total in federal prison. She'd tried to appeal my civil judgment, claiming bias, but the appellate court reviewed the case and found no grounds. My ruling stood. Her assets were liquidated. The foundation received every cent owed, plus the additional damages. Daniel's divorce was finalized. He was free. The Riverside Community Foundation was thriving again. The scandal had actually increased awareness, and donations had poured in. The board had implemented new oversight procedures, new checks and balances. They'd never be vulnerable like that again. And Daniel had started volunteering there. He worked with teenagers, helped them with college applications, mentored kids who needed guidance. He said it helped him heal, being part of his father's legacy in a real, honest way. Every Sunday, Daniel came to my house for dinner. At first, it was awkward. We were both careful, polite, testing the waters. But slowly, naturally, we found our rhythm again. We cooked together. We laughed. We talked about everything and nothing. We were rebuilding, brick by brick, what had been torn down. One Sunday evening, about 4 months after the trial, we were washing dishes together. Daniel was drying while I washed. The radio was playing softly. It was peaceful, simple, ordinary. Perfect. Mom, Daniel said suddenly. Can I ask you something? Of course. How did you stay so calm in that courtroom? How did you not let your emotions take over? I would have lost it. I handed him a clean plate. I did feel everything. The rage, the hurt, the betrayal. All of it. But being a judge taught me something important. Dignity isn't the absence of pain. It's how you carry yourself through the pain. He nodded thoughtfully. Stephanie thought she could break me by calling me old, useless, a shame, but she misunderstood something fundamental. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself and others, especially when you're tested. I could have abused my power as judge, I continued. Could have been vindictive, let my personal feelings cloud my judgment. But justice isn't about revenge. It's about truth, accountability, and restoration. The law is bigger than my hurt feelings. Justice required me to rise above my pain and rule based on evidence and law. Nothing more, nothing less. That's why everyone respects you so much, Daniel said quietly. I smiled. The slap outside the courthouse hurt. It was humiliating, but it also freed me in a way. It showed everyone exactly who Stephanie was. Sometimes people reveal themselves so completely that all you have to do is step back and let justice take its course. We finished the dishes in comfortable silence. Then Daniel said, I forgave her today. I looked at him in surprise. You did? Yeah. Not because what she did was okay, not because I'm excusing it, but because I realized that holding on to that anger was only hurting me. She's in prison. She's paying for what she did. I can let go now. I hugged him. That's very mature of you. I'm proud. Have you forgiven her? I thought about it. I've forgiven you. That was important to me. You showed genuine remorse, made real changes, took responsibility. As for Stephanie, I don't carry hatred for her. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean letting someone hurt you again. I've forgiven her in the sense that I'm not letting bitterness poison my life. But I'll also never trust her. Never give her another chance to hurt me or anyone I love. Those two things aren't contradictory. You can forgive someone and still protect yourself from them, Daniel said. Exactly. We moved to the living room. Daniel had brought old photo albums from storage, pictures from before Stephanie, from his childhood. We spent the evening looking through them, remembering better times. Dad's face smiled up at us from faded photographs. Daniel looked so young and happy in the pictures. I miss him, Daniel said softly, looking at a photo of Richard. I do too. Every day. But I think he'd be proud of you, honey. Proud of how you found your courage. Proud of how you're rebuilding your life with integrity. I hope so. As the evening wound down and Daniel prepared to leave, he hugged me tight at the door. I love you, Mom. I love you too, son. Welcome home. After he left, I sat in my quiet house and reflected on everything we'd been through. People often ask me about that case now. It became somewhat famous locally. They ask how I managed to remain professional, how I didn't let emotion overtake duty. The truth is simple. I learned long ago that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by who you choose to be in the face of adversity. Stephanie tried to diminish me by calling me old, by implying I was worthless, taking up space that should belong to someone younger, more deserving. But age has given me something she'll never have. Wisdom, patience, perspective, and the understanding that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, enduring. The same qualities that let me raise a good son, build a meaningful career, survive profound grief, and face that courtroom with dignity are the qualities that define me. Not Stephanie's opinion, not her cruelty, not her lies. Life taught me that people who try to diminish you often do so because they fear your strength. They see something in you that threatens them, some quality they lack and can never possess. Stand firm in who you are. Live with integrity. Trust that truth has power. And never, ever let anyone convince you that you're less than you are, especially when you're standing in your own truth. The judge's chair was always mine. Stephanie just didn't know it yet. But more importantly, my dignity, my worth, my love for my son, those were always mine too. And no one, no matter how cruel or calculating, could ever take that away. The road ahead for Daniel and me isn't without challenges. Healing takes time. Trust, once broken, must be rebuilt slowly, carefully. But we're doing it together. We're both stronger for having survived this. We're both wiser, and we're both grateful for second chances. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't the dramatic ones. They're the quiet Sunday dinners, the shared laughter over old photographs, the simple peace of knowing you're loved and you're home. That's the real justice. Not the courtroom ruling, though that mattered, but the restoration of what was stolen. Family, love, connection, hope. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever had to stand firm in your truth when someone tried to tear you down? Have you ever had to choose between revenge and justice? Between bitterness and healing? How did you find your strength in those moments? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own strength, or gave you hope that healing is possible, even after betrayal, please consider giving it a like. It helps others who might need to hear this message find it. And if you'd like to hear more stories about courage, resilience, and the quiet power of standing in your truth, please subscribe to this channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Someone who's facing their own battle and needs a reminder that they're stronger than they know. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. May you always know your worth. May you always stand firm in your truth. And may you always remember that dignity is not about never feeling pain, it's about how you carry yourself through it. Take care of yourself. And remember, you're stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and more loved than you realize. Until next time.